everyone. My name is Erin Ashley Simon, and welcome to Presence of Mind episode 5 Burnout Under the Hot Lights. Today, I am joined by two amazing women who I look up to in the broadcast space. We have Froskurinn and Sjokz. Of course, if you guys all watch the LEC, you know exactly who they are. Ladies, how's it going? I know it's like 2 in the morning over there, so we really appreciate you guys joining us today.
Yeah, it's going well. Thank you. Pleasure to be here. It's really no biggie staying up a bit past our bedtime to talk about important things like these, and very excited to be here.
You just basically gave me an excuse to play more Cyberpunk, so taking time out of my schedule.
Well, before we get to all the gameplay, this is actually a kind of a fun question. I like to always do icebreakers before we really get into the very deep conversation. Now, Frosk, I know that you are very passionate about crime shows and crimes and serial killers. So, if you had to pick one or two other people to help you solve a crime, and Shocks, this is for you too, from the LEC cast, who would be the best on a detective team?
I can only
Oh my
make two.
gosh.
Yes, only two.
So I'm gonna
Well,
say I've. Oh wait, I just want to say I've played Among Us with Verius, and he is
you're not taking
super.
Betty.
He's third imposter, so like he would not be on the team.
I'm taking Medic because I feel like his doctor knowledge would be really helpful in trying to like read some of the clues and some of the logic process of his brain, and he's a great listener.
Yeah.
And I'm taking Draco's because he's definitely a serial killer.
I gotta agree on the medic part. That's a good shout, but I think I'd take Ender. I don't know. There's something about he's always the fastest with all the memes and the jokes and the in jokes and everything, and he understands things quick. And I don't know. I think he'd be a good person to solve a murder with. That sounded like it was a fun activity, which it wouldn't be. But yeah, that would be it. I don't even
All
know
I'm
if I'd
gonna
pick myself.
all I'm gonna say, Aaron, is she had the option to pick me, and she chose not to.
Yeah, Sean, Frost,
Right
Frost
back at you.
really, Frost has all the breakdowns. I remember I sat at a podcast with her. She broke down like cases and different profiling stuff. She would actually be pretty solid for a
Oh my god, I'd
detective
actually
case.
take myself out for Frost instead. That'd be better. Yeah.
But the reason why I ask these questions is because it gives a little insight into people to see kind of the relationships that you guys have amongst your counterparts. And the one thing you all have in common is just the high demand of a big broadcast in the esports space. And that puts a lot of pressure and shines a light on all of you guys. Now, for those who are tuning in for this episode, which is about burnout under the hot lights, we're gonna be talking about the demands of elite esports athletes and also broadcasters. And with that, shoutcasters have a front row seat to the highs and lows of some of your favorite stars in this space. And many of the casters, commentators, and hosts, they deal with their own pressures as the faces of the sport during competition, during the live broadcasts. And in our panel, we're going to be discussing both shared and unique challenges from their careers. We'll also give you guys some tips and tricks that they've learned about maintaining a healthy work life balance and also working to ensure that they put out the best content not only for the athletes themselves, but for the fans too. So the first question I'm going to ask you guys starting off is how do you manage the high demands and needs of the LEC, especially because, you guys have the biggest broadcast and one of the biggest broadcasts in the esports space. And especially when it comes to the digital era, everyone and anyone could talk to you and chime in and say whatever to you at any point, even during broadcast. So how do you guys handle that stress on an international stage? Shocks, we're going to start with you and then Frost after.
Yeah, well, it is definitely very interesting that there are so many people who can share their opinions with you in real time. I also do think that that's one of the things that esports has as a leg up above traditional sports broadcasting, for instance, because a lot of the attraction lays in the fact that you can directly communicate with us, with the players, with the management, whatever, etc. And it makes it feel like you're one big community, which we, of course, are, but that also means that there's also a lot of unsolicited opinions that come your way all the time. And I think about this often in terms of like did I choose to be in this position? And it's kind of like yes and no, because when I started out almost 10 years ago now and I made my Twitter account, it was mainly just to be like, hey, I made this video with SK or whatever, or I did this interview, go and take a look. And I feel like, especially in the last maybe 4 years, it has spawned into something completely different. And then even more in this year, in 2020, when everyone had a lot more time on their hands to tell you exactly what they thought at every given point in time. And it's not easy. I think, especially because with the LEC or with any live show, you are working towards a deadline every week, and that deadline isn't going anywhere. And you have to have an entire live show ready. In the span of 4 days, you work towards it, and then you have to do it, and it all has to be on point. And once you're live, you can't take anything back, and people are immediately going to jump on whatever you say. And the question how I manage it, sometimes I ask myself as well. I don't know. I try and compartmentalize my time and think about, okay, now I'm working towards this goal of the show, and I'm going to put myself out there and prepare for everything and going to take all the comments that come my way. But then when that is over, I'm going to try and switch off and focus on the next thing. But it is much easier said than done, especially when it's just week on week on week. And it's just, you sometimes say something that you don't even know will take on a life of its own, that people have taken out of context or have misconstrued, or maybe you made a huge mistake. And it's very stressful, I find personally, for sure.
I
Frost,
think
what
there
about you?
I think there's kind of two different parts of it. Shock's kind of already touched upon it. There's the part where your responsibilities to your broadcast, your craft, your team, and then there's also your responsibilities in your relationship, be that parasocial or intimate with the audience itself. And you manage these in very different ways, and they both have very big demands. And I think that's something that not a lot of people take into account. They think that it's the same job, but it's in fact two very different jobs. And then I think there's also the development and evolution of our role in what we used to be. Shocks has been doing this for much longer than I have. I've been doing it for about 6 years, and even in just my 6 year tenure, it's been a very different position of just showing up and casting games, and now working as an ambassador, if you will, for navigating situations when PR things hit the fan, and Riot needs a spokesperson. Oftentimes, we are the front-facing spokespeople to that, and that has a whole different set of responsibilities and different craft that you need. There's kind of like a reason why you usually see the same shoutcasters, if you will, stepping up and being the microphone for very sensitive topics. It goes with its own PR training and expertise, if you will. So I think that there's a lot of different components, and we're always told this is just the life of someone in the spotlight. The word, I hate using the word like celebrity, but it gets like thrown around. It's like, oh, what do they expect? The athletes, they do this all the time. The celebrities, they do this all the time. And I'm just like, I think that's a really toxic way to look at it. I do agree with
Yeah.
Shocks that the intimacy that esports shares with the audience through Twitch chat, through social media, does give us a leg up. And I think it's what makes our sports so compelling and our scene and our community so compelling. Because to me, Twitch chat at its heart, even if people just think of it as like just toxic or memes or whatever you want to like call it, it's still like community. You're like reaching out and you're interacting with other people. And I think that's at the heart and soul what games are, and what gamers and what esports is about, is that interaction. And, it's just that interaction is positive or toxic. But it it's unhealthy, this mentality that that's just the way it can be when we have so much power to actually change it and shape it and make it not be so horrific, so that a player makes a mistake on stage, or a shoutcaster makes a mistake on broadcast, or a dev makes a mistake and releases something and doesn't like get out the mob to burn them alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of that, like you say, with part of that interaction is to interact with those who are watching. And speaking of that, for those who are tuning in now, if you actually have any questions for Frost and Shocks, please drop in the Twitch chat. We're going to collect them, and we'll be sure to ask them throughout the program, because we want this is a chance for you guys to really talk to them about the pressures that they have being in this broadcasting spotlight. Now, ladies, I know that some of the pressures, and a lot of people don't, pay attention to as much, or maybe they don't know, is that there are a lot of times where things can go wrong in a broadcast, and it's part of our skill sets to prepare for everything and anything. Whether it's maybe a player messed up, or a teleprompter stops working, or something happens with the player's computer, and you're just trying to fill time. But it gives an additional pressure, because not only do you have a bunch of people watching and commenting, but you can't really tell them that there's a problem and you're trying to solve the problem while you're trying to do a broadcast. So, talk to us a little bit about some of these pressures that you guys go through during these broadcasts, and how do you handle these during high stake moments? Frost, and then Shocks after.
I mean, ideally, you don't notice that it's happening unless we do tell you. I know
Yeah.
that there's occasions in Prompter where, the host, or Shocks, or Dash, or Trevor, or Dracos will have to say, like, and by the way, guys, if you notice that there's a break, it's because we're working on X technical difficulty. But, even before that, usually someone will ping into Shocks' ear and tell her, there's X problem, you need to stall. And so then you can almost see the shift in Shocks' mind. Sorry, Shocks, I speak for you. You can see like
That's
the
fine.
shift in Shocks' mind as she goes into like more like interview mode when because we have a rough outline of kind of like all the topics that we want to cover to make sure that our coverage is fair, that everyone's getting the right amount of time, and that we're have our graphics and assets. When we say that the show is scripted, it's scripted for our production team. It's not scripted in the answers that we're going to tell you. It's scripted of, here's a transition, this is where we're going to talk about champ select, this is where we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z, and then the graphics fly in. And then when those problems happen, it's up to our host, our Shockses and our Dashes, to throw the script out and turn to the experts and is like, dance for me, monkeys.
Can I admit something?
Yes.
I actually thrive and like when those things happen nowadays, because especially in the LEC broadcast and Riot broadcast, they are organized to a T. And of course, not mentioning this year where we all had to kind of adjust with the from home broadcast, but typically not much goes wrong. And this is a far cry away from like 5 years ago when things would break every 5 minutes. Nowadays, it's all pretty smooth, and I actually long for the moments. I mean, I don't want things to break and I want everyone to be comfortable, but I kind of like that I'm being tested at some points in time, and to like troubleshoot the show as it is live and as I am talking live. And it's really invigorating to kind of push yourself and try and find, together with productions, ways to keep things interesting. And we have a talkback button, and oftentimes if we're filling and you see the camera on someone else on the desk, for instance, I'm pushing the button and saying, what's the delay? Our producer Kevin or John or Brett will say, um, it's a big or a small delay, big delay, and then I'll probably say something like, "Hey, do we have the schedule graphic or do we have the standings graphic?" And maybe that sound on tape video we had of before, I'd love to bring that up after this. I say that more concisely because we're live, of course, and I kind of like that. But it's still very stressful that you are kind of the beginning and the end of every broadcast as the on-air personalities, and you are expected to give all the information to the viewers, and they also take it as gospel. So if you make a mistake, that's a big problem, especially when it comes to kind of why was there a technical delay? Why did a team pause? Why did we have to remake the game in the worst case, or chrono break the game, which is a tool to kind of reset the game to the point where it broke? Um, so you have a really big responsibility. I think that is why being on a show for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours straight takes a very, very big toll on you mentally, and tires you out in ways that people may not experience when they do other things. Of course, other jobs are difficult in other ways for sure, but there's this specific type of kind of mental draining that goes on because you have all these hats on at the same time. You're casting a game as Frost, but you're also calling a graphic to come up. You're troubleshooting something that happened. You're getting information. You're getting all the social media comments. It's a lot, Frost.
It's also the fact that, as Trox is saying, like, you're plugged in. I've worked a lot of different jobs. Like, I've been very fortunate that I've done just like a random assortment of things, kind of like throughout my life, to like hard manual labor, to the stereotypical retail job, to like the white collar job. And not saying that shoutcasting is like hard or anything. Like, we're very fortunate.
Yeah.
But I do think that people really underestimate how much you have to be plugged in. There is no, like, at my desk jobs, I could be like, okay, I got to get this report in, but time to check Reddit, can check Twitter, It's okay, like, you go and you take your lunch break for, like, an hour, and then you come back, and you've got, like, your smoke breaks and your social media breaks, and boss comes by, "Okay, I gotta work, gotta work, gotta work, gotta work." Um, at least in my experience of broadcast, there is no turning off. Like when we're on, we are on all day. We have to be plugged in. We have to be watching the games and you're constant. It's not like when the analyst desk isn't on that we just like sit back and chill. We're sitting there, we're watching the games and I'm looking over at Shocks. I'm like, okay, Shocks needs us to help her put together a segment. Okay, we're gonna pull this graphic. Okay, I'm running over to EVS. I'm gonna tell them we need the graphic right here to here. Okay, now I'm gonna go and quickly run through like what's happening in the game. Okay, make sure, okay, yeah, that graphic's gonna come up. Like there's no pausing and stopping. It is like full on. You don't I have to get unplugged to go to the bathroom, so oftentimes I just don't pee for the entire day.
Oh wow, that's another side effect. But hey,
Oh,
I
it's
do
so
love.
awful.
I love that it's so high paced, but it does take a toll at times, especially when it's long weeks and long days.
Yeah, and like both of you guys were saying, it takes a toll, and also you're on the entire time because what if your colleague's mic isn't working? You got to step in and fill in as a host at the desk. You have to still follow the match. You have to write notes because if you got to fill time, you got to have enough things that you can talk about that's relevant. And it's just go go go. But also part of it too is like it's high stressful, but when you love what you do, the time also goes by pretty fast in some
Yeah.
capacities. Sometimes it's slow when there's tech problems, but then sometimes it goes by really fast. But you ladies are doing some phenomenal things because we actually have someone in the Twitch chat that just said their name is Robin Replicant. They said, "Thank you, Frosk and Shocks. You both are one of the reasons the show is fun to watch. Please stay forever in business." So you guys are doing a tremendous job, and people are paying attention to that. But kind of adding on to a question that another person in the Twitch chat asked, as Jin Soul Luna, I'm gonna kind of mix my question with their question because
Hmm.
obviously, I have to ask this as two women in the esports broadcast space. There are double standards and sexism
Here it
that
comes,
happens.
Shocks.
Here we
That
go.
happens. I gotta get right to it. And I know that Shocks, you did put out a video not too long ago, and how unfortunately as women there are moments where our credibility and our skill sets and our accomplishments are come to question when it comes to different things. So how do you guys navigate that and handle that, and especially when you are held to certain standards, not only in terms of what you do, but even Frost, we talked about even how you look is part of it as well. So how do you guys manage that and navigate that space, especially on major broadcasts? Shocks, I want to start with you and then Frost.
Yeah, well, if I had the magic formula, I would be much better off, but I don't. And honestly, it's very touch and go. And one thing I kind of want to explain to people who may not realize it is that I think people often see us highlight a comment on social media, and then people will be like, don't feed the trolls or whatever, or whatever. But the thing is, it's not about just that one comment, and it's not about that one commenter. It is about something that is rampant in our community and is also rampant in the professional scene that lies beneath it. And in business meetings with big executives, I've had the question asked, do you even play games and what are you here for, and stuff like that. And that is the reason why we do keep speaking out about it, because it is a systematic kind of undermining of the achievements of many women in this community. And as you say, at the double standards, a mistake that a male colleague may make that he would get away with, but that you get lambasted over and over again. And I think the main thing that hangs behind that is the constant question of, were you just hired for a quota or something, and did they just want to give the woman a chance and stuff like that, which is, of course, incredibly toxic and incredibly sexist. And unfortunately, it is very much alive. Now, again, I have not found, I have found a way to work with that for me personally, which is focusing on my own achievements more and more and doing my best to do so, and having a good support system of peers and people I can talk to, also people like Frosk in similar situations, who I can bounce off of when it becomes too much and when I need I really need to touch base and or leave it all out, and hopefully I can do that for the other person as well, or kind of get like, am I going crazy, or did I read this wrong, or is this, having like a group of people that you trust and that you can go back on, that aren't kind of the sounding board of the internet. But the second thing I found is that I do want to be an activist, and not 24/7 all the time, because it also takes a toll on you, but both by kind of the work that I do, and highlighting achievements of other women that may be at the beginning of their journey or at the middle of the end, and that run into these things all the time, and privately also help them out if they need help and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know. Today is a good day, but tomorrow might be a worse day, because it's sometimes people say just ignore it, but there is no ignoring something that is such a fundamental and big problem. And I don't believe in not feeding the trolls and shutting it all off. I believe in making statements and trying to make it better.
I think
I
the thing that
agree.
pisses me off the most is that we're so busy having the conversation of whether it exists or not, and not having the conversation about how to fix it.
Yeah.
That is what pisses me off. And it's just like, when people say that shit to me, I'm like, I cannot help you because you are on page one and I am on book five. Like, we are
Yeah.
having completely different conversations right now, and I just need you to trust me that this is happening. It breaks down as simple as this. When my male colleagues say something, it means more than when I say it. That is like the easiest way to understand it. And you just have to take our word for it. Like, I'm too busy fucking coming through to educate you. um, and it's also like, like Shox is saying, some days there's good days and some days there's bad days. And, sometimes that we'll have the time where we'll like sit down and we'll really try to
Yeah.
like
Try to talk.
empathize with you to like help you out. And then some days it's like, get out of my face, because you have no idea the amount of meetings that I sat through where I was ignored or laughed at,
Mhm.
disrespected, got pulled over the coals for a mistake that I see my male colleagues make all the time and no one says anything to them. So sometimes handle it well and sometimes you don't handle it well. I think the biggest thing though is that when we don't handle it well, it like goes down on our record, and it, to me, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. People still in this League of Legends community say that I'm sexist against men. That is like still something that's thrown at me. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely crazy. I mean, we just saw recently, even with myself, how people were saying that not even just women, but that people of color in the community are just wanting things and not earning them, which is not true. But unfortunately, even that kind of conversation is happening right now. There's just so much that's going on. But I also think part of it is the fact that people on the outside either don't understand the problems, don't want to address the problems, or they don't really know what goes on behind the scenes like we do. And so
Yeah.
with that, we actually have a fan in the Twitch chat that this is a really great question that I want to ask you guys on behalf of them. So Ihana LOL asks, with all this stress and this pressure that you guys get as broadcasters, what can fans do to help players and casters not feel that immense pressure or not feel immense hate for when you make a mistake or if someone doesn't like what you say? Like, what can fans do better or help with?
Huh.
I
Go
think
ahead,
it
Froskurinn.
I think it starts with, so I'm a firm believer that you can really only impact like your intimate community, and that if we start small, that like these changes won't be fixed in like a month, a year, 2 years. They'll be fixed when hopefully my children grow up and are a part of this community. And then with the principles that I've instilled with them, that changes things. And maybe that's like a really cynical way of looking at it. But I think the best thing that you can do is that if you're in a Discord call with people, if you're in a Twitch chat with people, if you're talking to your friends and like you hear that toxic shit, like call them out. Tell them that that's not okay, that that's not the language that we use, that hey, like have you thought about this? Because like ultimately, if we just all take care of like our intimate circles around us, then hopefully you're going to be in a more positive environment with like support people that are probably like nicer to you and like nicer to be around. And then b, that shit rolls over. And if everyone is just like a chain link, like again, it's like it's the community aspect of it. I don't think it's that hard to like look at your friend and be like, dude, don't say that word.
No, I was laughing because you're swearing so much, and I don't know what
Yeah,
our
I know.
allowances, what our
It's 2 a.m. I'm already like 6 shits overdue.
Releasing stress. It's just one of the ways you release stress. Can't do it on a broadcast, but you could do it off of it. But no,
Listen,
it's
I haven't been on broadcast in months.
Oh my god. We've got loosey goosey Frosk. It's great.
It's okay. It's okay because you know what? You're being you, and that's the most important thing. I think people forget, especially when it comes to broadcasters. It's like, yes, we help with entertainment and help with the broadcast, but we are humans at the end of the
Yeah.
day. We also have feelings and everything like that. Shocks, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, there was this great clip I saw that Vedius linked me. I think it was a while ago. I don't know who it was. It was a streamer who I didn't know, and he went off on this exact topic. And he was just saying, like, "Today, I do not have time for you. Um, I don't know who you are, but just ignore it. That doesn't work for the majority of us because we are real people with real feelings and real struggles and a whole life of things next to the person you see on camera that we're also dealing with. But what I always think is important to emphasize, because I'm the same, I get bogged down by the negativity so much, and that is something that I'm actively trying to change. Is, as said, highlighting or thinking of my own achievements in a good way and other people's achievements in a good way, giving them props publicly and privately, because we need so much more of that. I think so much right now is focused on tearing each other down and being negative. When why, there's a difference between criticism and flame, and I think people have to see that, because um yeah, there is clearly a difference. I mean, just read through your Twitter replies every single given day. But I do think it's also important to focus on the fact that there is so much good and so much positive as well. And I need to train myself to look for the positive, because I think it is human nature, right? Psychologically, you just tend to focus on the negative easier, especially when it pertains to yourself. um, but also in the people that are watching, and that kind of want to make it better. Also, kind of think of all the good things we have going for us, and we just want to make that better. And we want to be as inclusive as possible so that our communities can grow and we can learn from each other. And it's not going to work if you go in with a closed mind where you're only being toxic and negative. And it's also not good for yourself either. Like, I don't know, if I'm like mad at someone, that really works on my mental state, and I can't attain that for a very long time. I need to find a solution, or I need to come clean or whatnot. So a little bit more positivity would go a long way for many people.
Yeah, positivity, good energy, and also it's okay to let some people close to you know that you're not okay. And there's
Yeah.
so many great resources out there. For those who are tuning in, if you ever are struggling, you want to learn more about how to support yourself or someone else, you could actually check out some resource options at findyourwords.org, which has great information on how to build resilience and talk about anxiety and depression, and also know the signs for suicide as well. And also, the one thing I've learned over time is that the mute and block button are two beautiful things that I have no
Yeah.
problem using whenever I need to use it. But yeah, it's always this fine balance, like you guys said, with knowing when to ignore, knowing when to say, okay, this person is trying to understand, so let me have a conversation, and then knowing when it's just like, oh, this person's just being rude as heck. Like I'm gonna block
Yeah.
or just tell him or her to like go off, right? But that's all part of building your brand and your social media presence, right? So, how do you guys manage that? And how do you guys navigate building your brand on social media without it taking a hold of you or taking control of you or bringing you down in any shape or form? And this question is coming from Soyhana LOL again.
I can jump in maybe. Well, first off, it's kind of interesting because we are in this place where social media has become so much like big business and is so incredibly lucrative and is also actively kind of cheered on from people, we're freelancers that we can get jobs from or that we can work for, and often it might not always be what your craft capabilities are, but also what is the reach that you can bring and what are the eyes that you can bring to a certain product. So that makes that, the extension of that, all your social media all of a sudden has to be a certain way because it has to be interesting to brands and this and that. And that's so difficult to navigate, I think. For me personally, I have over the years tried to make sure that I knew what it was that I wanted to put out there and kind of what version of me is it, or what do I want to show to millions of people at the end of the day, which is crazy to even think about, and it sneaks up on you. And what are the things that I do not want to talk about? And I think people often, with me specifically, probably think that I talk about everything, because I do talk about a lot. But make no mistake, I have a clear demarcation line of some things that I will never talk about, and people that I will never show you, or things that I maybe struggle with that I do not want to talk about, or my family or whatnot. And but there's a lot that I also want to show you because I think it could also help people who see people going through kind of similar things. And aside from that, kind of trying to recognize the signs in myself of when it's been too much. And it happens often. It happens for me every couple of weeks where something has just really gotten under my skin. And it's usually a combination of, in mine and I guess Frosk's case as well, not sleeping a lot. We both have very heavy sleeping issues. A lot of stressors, and then a lot of online commentary, and like the ones that you're having a bad day, and that one comment, that is the one that just tips the bucket over. And it's like the next day you might have not been affected by it, but it just happens. And I'm teaching myself to recognize these stressors quicker and then go to people that I confide in, and talk through these things, and make sure that I take a break when necessary. But as said before, I don't have the perfect formula, and it doesn't always work out.
It's kind of
Yeah.
like if you ever see that. Listen, you rando on Twitter, if we respond to you, it's not because you somehow broke through to us and that you're somehow special. No, you were just 1,000,001. That's what
Yeah.
you were. The counter just flipped over, and at that time, I was like, "I've had enough," and you just
Yeah.
start going in.
Quote
Um
retweet.
so getting no, I wish I was more conscious about it, like Shocks. I try, like, every year I, like, sit down, I'm like, "I'm gonna have, like, a development plan for my social media, and, like, these are the words I want attached to my brand, and these are the goals and growth." Because she's right, like, to make money, you go and you have a presentation, like, I have this much reach, and if that number is higher, then do I pay my rent this this month? Do I get to eat this month? It can be tied
Yeah.
directly to my social media, so it's not like you can just unplug. That's a bad business decision. But always I fail it, and now my social media is very, very, very close to who I am, and that is a terrible thing. I would never recommend that to anyone that is, like, shooting from the hip every single time. Am I having a bad day? Social media is gonna be awful. Am I having a good day? Then I guess we're on form and I'm not getting fired today.
Yeah, it's definitely a love-hate relationship. I always tell people like, "Yeah, I'm on Twitter, but I actually hate Twitter." Like,
I
if
hate
I if
Twitter.
if I had a career where I did not have to use Twitter, you would never catch me on Twitter.
It's
But
it's
it's
so
Twitter
awful,
is
like
bad, isn't it? But there
yeah.
are also so like there are such good parts also, and like sometimes
Yeah.
people come up with stuff that I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever seen, and then there's just like a pool of negativity, and I'm just like,
But
okay,
this is what I've learned about, like, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. I'm just like, these are not for me. Like, these are now tools that I can use as, like, a billboard in, like, branding opportunities, but, like, I watch my partner using Twitter or using Facebook, and I could never use them that way. I could never use Reddit that way anymore because chances are that I will be one of those topics that Reddit is talking about. I used to be like, in there in the comments and very excited, and now I'm just like, Reddit is a dark place. We can no longer go there. It is not for us. And that feels really unfair. What am I
yeah.
supposed to look at when I'm pooping, guys? I don't have anything now. I'm back to the
I
shampoo bottle. It's unfair.
Come on, guys. We gotta give Frost a place to read. We gotta make it a better place for her to read. You never know, right? But yeah, it's such like I said, it's such a love hate relationship because I think the great thing is that like you were saying, Shocks earlier, the accessibility that we have within esports and gaming space, especially as broadcasters, like people. Stephen A. Smith and the rest of them, Skip Bayless and them at sports, aren't going to respond to certain people fans' tweets, but we do, right? And that's that
Yeah.
great aspect of the industry. But then it also makes it where everyone and anyone can give their opinions, even if their opinions are just not warranted, you know? And so it's unfortunate that that's the case. But you know, with social media, that's part of your guys' schedule, right? You're setting a time to answer questions, you're setting time to critique, to commentate, and everything like that. But it's only a fraction, maybe this big, that big. I don't know. It depends on what day. But it's just a fraction of what your overall schedule is like. Now, Optimize One, who's in the Twitch chat, asked this question. How does your schedule change from week to week in the LEC broadcast? And are some weeks more hectic than others? And how do you manage such drastic changes in schedules?
Okay, I'll go first.
We'll have very
So
different schedules, I imagine.
yeah, well, I mean, we are both freelancers since 2.5 years, or like almost, and Frost since a year, I believe. And that can be stressful because, as you know, Aaron, you just want to be able to take the jobs, and if you get a job offered, the chances are, if you like it, that you're going to say yes, because that's freelance life, you're just constantly hunting for the next jobs, and that makes the week to week kind of complicated because you never know what's coming. And I think especially in esports, um, planning is not a lot of organizations and companies' strong suit. I need to give a big congrats to Cloud9, because this was really easy to schedule and we had the time like weeks in front, and that was great. But that is often not the case. Very often it is, hey, do you have time for a call of an hour in an hour or something? It's like, making dinner or whatever, but I guess so, because this might be a job opportunity. So that's constantly it. And for the weeks that we have LEC, in terms of LEC, it's kind of just like, if people think that we're only like we show up to the studio on Friday and Saturday and that's it, to kind of give an idea, the work week starts, let's say, Tuesday. Now in Corona times, we've been at home, but usually we go into the office as freelancers as well. And there's a day of brainstorming and brainstorming what we want to talk about as a group for the show, what graphics we want, what's replays we want, which discussion segments we want, maybe which funny segments we want, if we need props, if we need to do this or that, all that stuff. A very packed day. And that keeps on going because you can't just switch off, because then you're thinking, oh, okay, I committed to doing this or this segment, so tomorrow I need to maybe look something up, if it's a historic segment, or if it's an analytical segment, then I need to talk to the producers about what I want. And then someone might ask, hey, can you look at this clip, because I got some bad feedback on it and I want a second opinion. Sure. And in between that is all the other stuff that you do as a freelancer, which is other jobs, preparation for other jobs, and also administration, which, paperwork. I hate it and I'm really bad at it, but you do that as well. And then, as you say, social media. And I find that if there's a week where I'm on, it's 24/7, baby. It is, I just can't turn it off. And especially after a show specifically, I need like 3 or 4 hours to come down from the show and the adrenaline of being in a live environment. That's really problematic if you only have 8 hours in between the two shows, obviously. And I basically, I don't know, I run on adrenaline usually in those weeks where it's really busy. And then hopefully I can crash for a couple of days. And then I run on adrenaline again for a week. That's kind of how it goes for me.
Frost, what
Yeah.
about you?
It's very similar. I guess there's also the windows where you're prepping. So far, Tuesday for just LEC is like our story meet day. Then you have to understand that our Monday, which would theoretically be the rest day because show ended on Sunday, is often used rewatching VODs or thinking about different segments. Because on Tuesday, it's jam packed with meetings. There's no free time. You're into a meeting about analyst desk. You're into a meeting about story meet. You're into a meeting, talking about schedule shifts or something like that. So you need to be ready to go with what you think about the teams or what you're planning for next week when you're there in that moment. And then you kind of figure out what segments that you're going to build. And then Wednesday will be usually building segments. If it's like Shox is talking about, like a historical segment, we write all of our own scripts. So we do have a script writer for the flow of the show. It's usually intros, outros, and just general direction. But if there's like a 3 wall or a telestrator segment, or like Shox's historical segments, those are all written by the talent ourselves. And we have a writer who's like a great photographic memory. So you'd be like, Evan, this clip, this play happened in 20. Be like, yes, 2017 when Perks
Yeah.
versus Faker, and he was playing, and we're like, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
But sometimes we even need to go and find our clips, and then you need to sync with your casters because you're preparing, or sync with your analysts because you're preparing that. So there's all of that. On top of the fact then that this was the first year that I didn't just get to focus on League of Legends like Shox has been doing for 2 years. I also had to learn about sim racing and all of these other gigs. And, then when you get a comment, it's like, well, Froskurinn, you mistakenly said what Aatrox's passive was. I'm like, do you know how fast an F1 car goes? I didn't think so. Like, shut up, random egg. I had 4 gigs this week. So it's that's why that stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's a learning curve, right? I mean,
Yeah.
every single broadcaster has messed up at some point. There's not one
Yeah.
broadcaster who has been perfect at every single one. And like you were saying, Jacques, in terms of the freelance life, it is very, very stressful. And because you're constantly working on trying to find different gigs, sometimes that work-life balance isn't the greatest. And a lot of times I tell people sometimes that work life balance isn't going to be 50-50. Sometimes it's going to skew more towards work. Sometimes it's skew more towards life when you need to. It's about identifying when you need to kind of make that adjustment.
Yeah.
So for you guys, what tips and advice would you give to those who are freelancers and interested in freelance broadcast careers? Because let's be honest, most of the jobs in esports are freelance. So what kind of tips and advice would you give to them in terms of managing their work-life balance, starting with Frost?
Don't be afraid to block out time for actual vacation or rest time. I think a huge concern in our industry right now is that you always have to be on, because like Shock said, organization and foresight isn't like the strongest skill. And if a gig happens in a 2-week period that you've blocked off to go take a vacation with your significant other, or go see family, or go to a wedding, one of these things, like people will be like, I just lost, like X number of dollars. And at some point you have to say like, no, that wasn't meant to be, and you have to be okay with it. And I think it takes a really long time to kind of get into that cycle. But like every single year on your calendar, just like book it out. Like, I am spending X time with my family. I'm gonna go to my best friend's wedding. I'm gonna go see my grandmother again. Like, and just be okay with it, that if a gig lands on that day, it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, and obviously, with all due respect for this year being so incredibly challenging, and many people probably was like, "Well, I wish I was booked out every day," and we've all felt that this year, right? So I think this year is a bit different from every other year, and let's hope things get better next year. But um, yeah, I also think having kind of a group of people that are your friends and that have been your friends or your family or one person or whatever that you can confide in. This keeps coming back for me because I think that is so incredibly important. That may not necessarily be as in tune to the world that you are, be it, they might know about gaming, but not specifically of esports, or, they're not watching every one of your broadcasts and picking everything apart. And they're kind of like a soundboard that you can escape in for a while. And you can talk about their world, and they can ask you questions, and the other way around, and you can ask their opinions on situations you find yourself in, etc. I think that's all very, very important. I'm lucky enough to have a significant other who knows about the business, but is also not the type of person to look at every single thing that I do all the time, and who is also a good barometer for me in terms of, I feel like you are incredibly stressed right now about this particular thing that is going on social. Turn off your phone, and someone that's honest with you also in that regard. But at the end of the day, you have to rely on yourself, right? And I really have to force myself sometimes to turn everything off and just completely go away, because there is that fear of, what if an email comes in about a job that I might want to do, or that pays well, or that I need, or any of those. But you gotta let it go sometimes, and it's so hard because it's counterintuitive to being a freelancer is switching off. But I think it's also something that is particularly a problem in tech and gaming, this 24/7 availability and the idea of, like, for instance, for Worlds, we had like a Discord group, a WhatsApp group, another WhatsApp group, a Gmail group, a Slack group, and then like the program we write our scripts in. And I said at one point, I said, hey, guys, can we have email and one platform? Because I don't want to be looking at WhatsApp and thinking about work when I want to be talking to my family about how my grandmother is doing, or something like that. And I think setting those boundaries for yourself and towards people that you work with is also very, very important. And it's not always easy because you're going to feel like you don't want to do anything wrong because this person is giving you a job. But the right ones will hopefully respect you for setting those boundaries.
And it's also a benefit having colleagues who are supportive. And speaking of that, we actually have Ender in the Twitch chat right now,
Ender, go
coming
to
and
bed.
He's
saying
always in Twitch chat.
saying hello. Well, he said I'm perfect. But yeah, setting those boundaries, having supportive people around you, whether it's friends or colleagues, is so, so important. But that freelance life adds that pressure of, when you're at a certain part in your career, you're establishing yourself, you're establishing your credibility. So you're afraid of not taking a gig because someone else could take it, right? How did you guys navigate that point when you were coming up where it's like, okay, I got to take this, I got to set my credibility because if I don't do this, someone else could. How did you guys navigate that? Shocks, start with you.
Um, well, actually, I was lucky enough that I didn't have to in the beginning, which was such a blessing because I think if I look at myself now in the things that I'm dealing with in the freelance life and the competitiveness and the social media and whatnot, and I put that on my 24-year-old self, she would have imploded. Like, that would have not been good. And I was lucky enough that I got, after the first year and a half of being freelance and really feeling those stressors, getting offered the full time job with ESL and then later Riot. So I can't speak to it back then, even only in the first year and a half, but already the things applied. And I think it's tricky because if you're coming up and you've come out of college, or you're just starting to work and working on your first project, you will want to work all the time and it's going to feel good. And you're going to feel like, this is my dream job. This is my dream business. And I think it's fine to do that for a little bit. But I think very early on, if you're watching this and you're starting out, try and recognize what kind of, puts you over the edge and when you're feeling too tired or too stressed, because you're not going to perform to the best of your abilities in those situations either. And try to recognize those early on in your career, because we also get older and our bodies are not as resilient and our minds as they used to be, unfortunately. So I think it's important to build up kind of the correct habits early on. I definitely didn't do this. So believe me, boomer shocks, telling the younger generation to take care of those things.
I strongly believe in shine theory, which is basically like if everyone shines, then like the whole product is better. And I think it's something that we instill in the LEC really, really well. That we're all working together to like make sure that everyone looks as good as possible. And I agree with Shocks that like in the very beginning, you want to take like every gig available because it feels like you feel like a Pokemon. You're like, I'm a Charmander, and if I just take this gig, it'll lead to this gig and this one, and then I'll start to evolve, and then it'll be better, and I'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. But I really strongly believe that like gigs, you don't lose a gig. Like if Ovely and I are going out for the same gig and Ovely gets it, I don't feel like I lost something to Ovely. I feel like Ovely was perfect for that gig. If someone comes to me and says like, "Oh, Frost, we have this 1v1 tournament that we'd love you to cast." I'm like, "You should really go and talk to Ender because I am awful when it comes to these micro mechanics, and Ender is a caster that can like give you that hype." And I feel like it's such a place of privilege to be able to like sit in a position and be able to like do that. But I think it's also like really important that we have such unique voices and such unique skill sets over the entirety of an industry. You know, like there's never going to be a point when I'm competing with Shocks for a job. Like Shocks has a vastly different skill set than I am, and if a gig is good for Shocks, it is definitely not a good gig for me. Like that's just how it's going to go.
Hey, you're a pretty good host as well, so
I,
let's just
I
put that
loved
out there.
when you went into host mode on Nitro Nights. I was like, ah, I see. Got a host over here making my life easy.
But it's interesting you brought up that point for us because I think that one of those important skill sets that some of us have to develop at various different points in our life is self awareness, right? And being self aware actually helps you in your career because when you say no to the gigs that don't fit you, it actually helps you because then what if you take that one gig and you just mess up horribly, right? Sometimes you only get one chance for certain opportunities. And it's about knowing yourself and knowing what you can do, what you're known for, what your skill sets are, what your specialties are. And that will help you along in your career. And part of that self awareness, too, is being aware of yourself and your emotions and your feelings and how you're coping with everything. And you ladies are seem to be very, very self-aware. And especially when it comes to you guys talking about your own experiences addressing mental health. And so with that, like, how does talking about mental health um show up for you guys, whether it's personally on social media, whether it shows up in the form of interviewing players, or it shows up in other personalities. Where do these moments of being aware of mental health, not only for yourself but for others, come up in your experience? Shocks, you first.
Um, First up, I know that I didn't used to talk about kind of my mental health issues publicly for a long time because also I didn't really know what was going on with myself. And I think that's a big thing where sometimes you just feel off and you feel like you're struggling with these things and you don't know why you are because you just haven't heard anyone talk about it, especially me and kind of from my parents' side and my grandparents' side. It wasn't really something that was talked about that much, even though my mom, who is a self-made woman who I look up to dearly, has a lot of issues with stress as well. It was never really something that was talked about as commonly, as not something that you saw in media as commonly either. Um, so I started to find it important a couple of years ago to put more emphasis on that publicly as well and share kind of my experiences with my community. And I also saw it as a two-way street. It was like, on the one hand, this is helping me because I get to tell you what I'm dealing with, and I get to kind of read what you are dealing with, and maybe something isn't there to help me, but I feel like I'm being listened to. And on the other side, hopefully, I'm putting this out there, and someone else thinks, "Hey, I'm dealing with that too, so I'm not alone, and maybe I should kind of look into how I can find help, etc." And I think that's a movement we've seen in the last couple of years come through social media of gaming specifically much more. And I think we should emphasize because there is still a big stigma, there's a big stigma on talking about mental health issues and the things that we deal with. And for me specifically, it's imposter syndrome, which I've mentioned a couple of times, which imposter syndrome is basically the phenomenon of doubting your own achievements and doubting them and thinking that you're about to get exposed as a fraud or that you don't deserve them or you don't deserve the achievements you get or the accolades that you get. And it's hard to say like what it exactly stems from, but obviously part of it stems from sexism and the fact that for so long in your career you've been second guessed if you were even there for the right reasons, if you deserve it, if you were putting in the work and all that. And then you start to internalize that after, in my case, a whole lifetime as a woman, but 10 years specifically in the industry and all these experiences that pile up. And it is something that I'm trying to work on. I am have been in therapy off and on. I kind of go through phases, and it's not made easier by the fact that I have very very heavy sleeping issues. I don't know if I've ever said this, but kind of insomnia and night terrors stemming from childhood PTSD. And those are all kind of things that I didn't know for the longest time, and that I was oh, I'm not sleeping, but it's because I don't deserve to sleep. I haven't worked hard enough or whatever. And all these like effed up thoughts in a society that just wants us to grind and work constantly and deliver and all that. And I've become more aware of that in the last couple of years, but it's really overwhelming. And I think it's important for that reason exactly to talk about it to the people around you, but also publicly. And I'm not saying for me like put everything out there all the time constantly, but do try and bring the topic up, and especially like for instance on this show, and talk about it, and know that so many people are dealing with things and you might not always know what they are dealing with. Um and and hopefully they can find help the way that I have as well. But I don't know if I answered your question. But
No, I think you did, Shocks. I
okay.
think the something that I want to jump off of that I think is really important that you brought up is how mental health intersects at our community, specifically the gaming population. It disproportionately impacts young men, especially like ages between 18 and 24. You see addiction, depression, suicide rates are all very high, and I think that stigma plays a huge part in it. Whatever you want to attach to this stigma. That people, it's okay to not be okay. That whole phrase, that campaign comes with opening the door to have the conversation to hopefully get people into support networks where we can start to impact these really terrifying statistics. And I think it's so crucial for our community because it shows in the numbers and the research that you look around and it's the players, broadcast team, audience, community, everyone that is disproportionately suffering with this. So like I'm right there with you, and it starts with like being open and honest about things so that hopefully someone else will either think like, hey, maybe I should ask if my friend is okay, or hey, I'm not feeling great myself, I can reach out to someone. And I don't know if you get this. I'm going to assume all the time. I get so many messages about people who aren't okay and are reaching out for kind of like the first time. And it's like, it's
Yeah.
awkward because like I'm not a therapist. And like, I never really know what to do, but I just try to always like reach back and be like, I see you. I hope that you can get help. Here's resources that I think that would be helpful for you. But like, it just confirms to me that it is a very widespread issue that needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, actually, one of those resources you could send to them too. And for those who tune in, if you need any resources when it comes to dealing with anxiety, depression, or even knowing signs for suicide, you can go to findyourwords.org. They have a lot of information there for everyone if you're going through a hard time. And yeah, I agree, ladies. Like, and I think another thing that's great about this episode and this podcast is showing that there are many of us that struggle with so many different things. And there's a lot of us who are dealing with mental health. And especially in 2020, a lot of us are going through a lot of things right now. But I think it's also great to show that, even if you deal with certain mental health challenges and obstacles, you could still succeed in life. Like for myself, I deal with anxiety and I've dealt with depression. And as a broadcaster, people may see us like happy and energetic and stuff, but there are some times where I may do a broadcast and I don't even want to do it at all. Like I don't even
Yeah.
feel like I am
Yeah.
low and sad. And especially I mean, I'll admit it. This year, I've lost people to COVID. I've had to do broadcasts while in the same time I was grieving for a loss. And it's a tough thing to do. But the great thing is that there are resources, there are people to talk to, and just knowing that everyone who's tuning in, if you are struggling, you're not alone. You're not alone in this. And I really hope that this conversation helped shed a light not only in the broadcast world, but also help to show that some of your favorite broadcasters, are going through some of the similar things as you guys. And so, ladies, we're almost towards the end. One thing I would like to ask you both is what is the last thing that you hope that everyone will take away from watching this Presence of Mind episode? Starting with you, Frost.
Oh, whew. I mean, I guess I feel really strongly of just again like the sentiment like it's okay to not be okay, and removing that stigma and looking around and just even a simple hello, and then just like the sentiment that you just phrased there, Aaron, of this idea of you can be like successful. I know that for a really long time I felt that I was just kind of like digging sideways in life and that I would never really be anything. And there are still days where I feel like really down, but I I have conversations with like people who I now consider like really good friends that started out as kind of like peers and they look up to me as like a role model. I'm like, "Oh shit, anytime someone says that I'm a role model, I'm like, "Oh no, you got to pick someone else. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I got here. I just kind of wandered in a direction." Um but yeah, like you can do it, guys. I believe
Yeah.
in you.
Yeah, I think I want to echo that as well. That what you see of us, and especially in this day and age of social media and kind of perfection that is being pushed to us from every angle, be it what you should look like, what you should say, how you should act, how you should feel, and seeing all these examples, I guess also of us that just come in a broadcast and we're all happy go lucky and everything's fine and we're kicking ass in life. We are not. Listen, especially in this year, we are all struggling, and many on different levels, right? And it's all different things for different people, but that doesn't mean that you can't also achieve your goals. But when your body and your mind say, "Whew, enough for a while," then it is time to take a break, and then it is enough for a while, and then you do need to reach out. And yeah, that's kind of the big takeaway after those last thoughts, that you can reach out, and that many people are struggling with similar things that you are, and there are ways to help you, and never to be ashamed of that. And yeah, I think that kind of summarizes it.
Yes, never be ashamed of it. And also, never be ashamed of who you are, because who you are is what makes you special at the end of the day. Froskurinn Sjokz, thank you guys so much for being part of this episode. Also, thank you guys so much for providing entertainment, relief, and a great experience for so many people, especially during 2020. And like you guys said, everyone goes through things, and you guys have gone through things, I'm sure, of in 2020. But I'm sure every single person who's tuning in appreciate it every moment of watching you guys on LEC's broadcast. So thank you both.
Right
Thank you,
back at
Aaron.
you, Erin.
You're welcome, and thank you guys. And also, I want to quickly say thank you to Cloud9 as well for this, and also thank you to Cloud9's partner Kaiser Permanente for helping to put on this podcast and also this episode as well. Now, before we end this, I want
Oh no.
Oh no.
It's a
Has
disaster.
she broken up for everyone, or is it just me?
I think it might be us. Sharks, close the show.
I don't know what she was about to say. Maybe thank you to everyone who's been commenting, because there were some really good questions and from Twitch chat, which means there is a lot of good that comes out of Twitch chat and social media as well. And we see you. It's just that all the negative people always divert the attention and steal our attention, but what we see you and we appreciate it.
See you, lovely Twitch chat. I know that my own Twitch chat's lovely, and you guys are rocking it out there. I'm sure Aaron was going to see something very important. Maybe a shout out to sponsors. I think it's KP and
Is
Cloud9.
it
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, I guess we're gonna close the show with that, since we unfortunately lost Aaron again. Thank you so much, Aaron, for hosting this conversation. Thank you to Kaiser Permanente, and thank you to Cloud9 for giving us a chance to talk about these very important issues here in Presence of Mind. And with that, we will be signing off. But she's back, so she can sign off.
I'm back. Sorry, guys. We are in the middle of a snowstorm, so
I'm
I'm
so
just
jealous.
happy. Oh, I mean, you could take all the snow. Please take it. We have a snowstorm for the next 2 days, so I'm gonna say this quickly before it cuts me off. And I gotta get through this. All right. So thank you guys once again. Thank you to Cloud9, Cloud9's partner Kaiser Permanente. Head on over to findyourwords.org.
Nailed it, Sharks.
And this is the last episode in the year of 2020. I want to say happy early new year to everyone. We won't see you guys in terms of presence of mind until the new year. Once again, my name is Erin Ashley Simon. Spreading love to everyone. Hope you guys have a great rest of 2020.
Bye bye.